is Vanessa here from the Craft Corner, and welcome to our second zero waste sewing project in collaboration with Maynooth Zero Waste Group. Today I'm going to show you how to make your very own bunting using fabrics that you would maybe have in your house already. For example, this one is made using an old pair of jeans. So, I'm going to gather our materials. I'm going to go through them in the next part of the video, or they're linked in the description below, and let's get started. These are the materials that you're going to need. To make your template, you'll need some cardboard, a ruler, a paper scissors and a marker. You'll need a material scissors, or you can also use a cutter like this. You'll need some pins, and you'll need some material. I'm using an old pair of jeans. There's sort of a bit of stretch in them, jeggings. Got two different types here. And I'm using material from an old dress that I took apart. You can use whatever material you like. Just make sure this is not too heavy. You'll also need some ribbon. And I'm just using ribbon that I had in my fabric stock. But if you didn't have your own ribbon, I'm also going to show you in a separate video how to make your own ribbon. I'll have a printable version of this template, but in case you don't have a printer, I'm just going to show you how to do it here. Get a piece of cardboard or the back of a notebook, anything you have lying around will do. And you're going to measure out 16 centimeters from a straight edge. So 16 and 16. Draw a line down there. Then you're going to measure out 8 centimeters and half of that. Now, this template is going to make this size bunting approximately, okay? A little bit bigger than this maybe. So make sure, don't make your bunting too small. I would say that 16 is probably the minimum width you want it to be, because you've got to allow for your seam allowances as well, remember. So 8 centimeters to get my halfway point. Okay, so that's the center line of my template. Now, lengthwise, I'm going to measure down 18 centimeters down. I'm measuring 2 points so that I can draw a straight line across. So, you have your rectangle, and you're going to measure out from here. So, I'm going to make my seam allowance 1 centimeter, okay? So I'm measuring out from the side 1 centimeter either side, okay? Either side of my center line. Then that goes back up to the outside points at the top. So you should end up with something like this, okay? This is going to give me my seam allowance of 1 centimeter all along here. So now, using your paper scissors, you need to cut this out. So now that we have our template done, we're going to cut out our triangles. So in some of these, you can see how I've actually included that seam there if I need to. So I could include that seam if I wanted to. You can make it part of your design. Now, if you are using, this is a little bit tricky to work with just because it's got a bit of elastic in it. Just depends what material you've chosen. So again, what I normally do is I just use my marker because all of the edges are going to be covered, so I'm not so much worried about that, the marker coming through. So you need 2 pieces for every triangle you want. Just going to use my pinking shears here. You could just use a straight edged material scissors because all of these seams are going to be concealed. So you're not going to have any raw edges on the finished product. Now I'm going to do the same for the floral fabric, and just make sure that whatever you're seeing underneath, for example in this, the pattern sort of going like that. So I'm just going to go over here, and I'm also trying to make sure that I'm not wasting any material. Cut it out. And And I save all these little scraps because I use them as stuffing for various projects. So you're going to make 2 triangles, a back and a front, for every piece of every triangle you want on your bunting. So you'll need to decide how long you want your bunting to be. And what I normally do is I leave a nice gap between it. So I leave a gap here. It's about 17 centimeters. So about 15 to 17 centimeters is a good gap between each one. It means also you've less sewing to do. But it might depend on how long you want your bunting to be. So decide the overall length, and then that'll help you decide how many triangles you need. Little flags. And you can also, you can start sewing them, and then if you need to add more, you can always add more as you go. Now, so you need to iron these 2 pieces flat, and then you're going to pin them right sides facing each other. So you're hiding the right sides of your fabric. Okay, so then you're going to get your pins. You're going to carefully pin these together, and it's important for this project that you do pin because it's not a very big piece of fabric and you don't want to end up that the seams move out of place. Just pin it there. Now, if you're sewing this by hand, again, you're going to do a back stitch along to the end and back up again. If you are sewing by hand, I recommend that you draw a line, especially on a project like this, that you can follow. So just do it on this side. Your seam allowance is going to be 1 centimeter here. So draw 2 lines, 1 centimeter and 1 centimeter. And using your marker or a pencil, just make sure the marker is not going to go through the other side. Just draw a line, so then you can follow that line when you're doing your back stitching, okay? And that just helps when you're doing hand stitching that you don't wander off, because what you want to happen is that at the end here, okay, that this line, it goes into a point, so that when you sew down here, you've got a point and then you're sewing back up again. Machine stitching, you'll sew down, you'll turn your fabric around and you'll sew back again. So it's one continuous line of stitching, and always remember to do your back stitch at the beginning and the end. So you've sewed your seams on either side. You leave the top open. Now what you're going to do is you're going to turn it inside out. Down here, if this fabric's a little bit bulky, what you can do is you can just trim it. Be careful that you don't cut your stitching. Just trim it to make it a little bit more pointed. Then you're going to turn it inside out. This little point here, very carefully with the point of a scissors, push it out. Poke it down to get that triangle point there. Turning it inside out. And then you need to press this with your iron and iron that flat. So you need to iron this flat, press out the seams. It's important that you do iron these to get them nice and flat. Now, this top seam here, what we're going to do is we're going to tuck it in on itself. I use the iron for this part because it makes it nice and easy. What I do is I hold these 2 side parts, right? And then I tuck it in like this. So tuck it in like that. You're folding it over on itself. Okay, can you see that there? It's folding it over on itself. Just check that it's even. And if you find this a little bit tricky, what you can do is you can just fold one piece at a time. So you could fold that down and press it with your iron. Use a bit of steam on it. Okay. And then you can fold the other one down to match it. I personally find it easier just to do it all in one go, pulling the edges, and they tuck themselves in. Tuck it in there. Press it down. So you can kind of hold it and then tuck the rest in. Try and make that line as even as possible, but if it's not even, you can disguise it a little bit with your ribbon at the top. Now that's coming up there a bit, so I need to tuck that in a bit more. Just tuck it in. Careful with your fingers. Now, so there you have your triangle done, and now what we're going to do is we're going to do a top stitch along here, but we're going to get our ribbon and we're going to sew it to the ribbon at the same time. So the idea behind this bunting is that it can be double-sided, so you can have two different colours, maybe for two different events. One other thing that you can add to your bunting, if you want to, is you can do lettering on it too. So you could cut out lettering and you could do a blanket or zigzag stitch all the way around the lettering. Now you would do this before you sew these triangles together, and obviously you need to make sure it's the right size as well. So here's my ribbon. The first thing that I do is measure out the gap. So my gap is, double check it. My gap between the two top edges is 17 centimeters. So lay out my ribbon, 17 centimeters, and I want the floral side facing up. So put it there, just move it along. So I do it so that the top of my ribbon is in line with the top of my material. Get yourself a pin, do one pin in, and then double check that distance again. Again, if it's a little bit off, it won't matter too much once it visually looks the same all the way along. So then 2 pins should be enough, and make sure, okay, that you're getting all of those layers of fabric. Again, I'm going to show you what, if it's slightly uneven, how you can disguise that. Now, so at the back here, you'll see, okay, that the denim comes down a little bit lower. So what I'm going to do is when I sew, I'm going to make sure that I'm sewing in the middle. I'm going to do my first line. I'm going to sew from the back, okay? So you can see here that the denim is coming down a little bit. So when I'm sewing, I'm going to sew from the back so that I can see this. What you need to make sure is that you're sewing very close to this edge, because you want to make sure that you're trapping all the layers of fabric together, okay? That you're sewing all of these layers and nothing's going to pop out. So because this is a little bit less on this side, I'm going to sew along here, keeping as close to that denim edge as possible. Now, so I've sewn a stitch all the way along, do my back stitch at the beginning and the end. I'm just going to trim my fabric. Now, the thread that you choose, you can decide. I actually quite like seeing the white at the back. It's a nice contrast from the denim. And I wanted it to blend in with the ribbon on the front because I wanted you still to be able to see the text. Then double check that all of the layers of fabric have been caught. If they haven't, you just need to do a second line of stitching. So once you've done one, you just keep going until you've finished doing your fabric bunting. At the very end, I recommend sewing a little loop. So just do a little stitch across here, and it's a really handy way how to hold the fabric. Now, in a separate video, I'm going to show you how to make your own ribbon if you didn't have fabric ribbon, or if you wanted to use something you already had in stock. Thank you so much for joining me for that zero waste sewing project in collaboration with Maynooth Zero Waste Group. It's a fantastic initiative, and thank you so much for asking me to partner with you on this. I really hope you've enjoyed the projects and you've learned or practiced some sewing skills, and keep on sewing and creating. You can follow along on my YouTube channel or on all the different social medias. You can find me at thecraftcorner.ie. I'm always happy to answer any questions you might have. So if you have any questions about these projects or other projects that you'd like to try, just get in touch. Talk to you soon. Bye now.